The next debate we'll take a look at on RFL has been an issue in this country for years, but since the rise of Donald Trump, America's relationship with undocumented or illegal immigrants has certainly been under a microscope. With constant sobering reminders in our headlines, like the drowning death of a father and his daughter in the Rio Grande River this week, or the administration's policy of child separations at the border leading to kids being kept in cages. But on other issues, particularly on the state level, there has been a different focus: enhancing the protection and rights when it comes to undocumented immigrants. Now, one of the issues is whether or not states should give driver license to undocumented immigrants. Now, these 13 states in the District of Columbia currently allow that to happen. The most recent state to join that group, New York. Lawmakers passed a bill this month in a vote that divided the Democratic majority in Albany, but not enough to stop the bill from passing. Governor Andrew Cuomo, also a Democrat, he signed the bill into law after the state attorney general determined that doing so would not pose a threat to public safety. But now, some county clerks in upstate New York, a far redder part of New York than people realize, say they will not issue licenses to the undocumented, and they want the Trump administration to step in to stop it. Here to discuss, Kieran Michael Lawler. Kieran, a Republican New York State Assemblyman who opposes licenses for the undocumented, and he voted against the bill. His district, about 2 hours north of Manhattan. Well, he sat down earlier with our senior political correspondent, Andrew Whitman.
Assemblyman Lawler, thanks for joining us. The obvious argument against licenses for undocumented immigrants is that it rewards them for breaking the law. I think that's the most easy argument to digest. Let's put that aside for now. What are your other objections to granting driver licenses for undocumented immigrants?
Well, there's a very practical reason to oppose it. We have county clerks who run the DMVs in the various counties around our state, and they have had a system in place where they verify that you're of age to drive, that you're who you say you are, and they know the documents that have to be brought forth for you to get a driver's license or even to get a permit and get ready to take the driver's test. Now, in 6 months, it's actually 5.5 months now, 6 months from when this legislation passed, we're asking every county clerk to become an expert in the documents of 195 foreign countries. And that is very impractical. I mean, how does the county clerk, if somebody from the Congo comes and says, hey, this is my birth certificate from the Congo, the county clerk in Wyoming County, New York, or Chautauqua County, New York, or Dutchess County, New York, he or she is going to evaluate that and say, yes, you should be granted a driver's license. Yes, you are who you are. We know that people in the country traffic in fraudulent documents, and we know that there's going to be cases where people are using other people's identities, using fraudulent identities. So that is a very practical reason. But there's more to this bill than just allowing illegal immigrants to drive. There are other changes to the law, and they're quite alarming. For example, right now, when this law comes into effect in December, if a federal law enforcement agency is investigating somebody, maybe they got a final order of deportation and ICE has every right to deport them, and they go to the DMV and they say, hey, let me see, maybe we can get an address on this person, maybe we get some information, maybe he was in a traffic accident or got a ticket, and we can kind of locate him to follow federal law and do what they're sworn to do. Right now, what this law says is not only do they have to go and get a judicial warrant to get this information from the DMV, which there's nothing private there, but the DMV tips off the person in the country illegally and says, hey, by law, they have to say, hey, federal law enforcement agents, specifically what agency, they came looking for you, so you might want to go further underground.
But that seems more like a specific relationship between New York State and the federal government issue, and specific to this particular law in New York. And since every state in our region has at least debated this to one measure or another, I want to try to keep it at least general enough that it would apply to other states as well. You mentioned the possible security threat, which I assume is the underlying concern if the clerks can't verify the documents. But the governor did ask the state attorney general to check and see if it was a threat to public safety. The attorney general came back and said, no, it's not.
Yes, and all of that happened in about 45 minutes because as this bill was coming up against the legislative deadline, our legislative session ended at the end of last week, the governor expressed some concerns. The concern was, would the federal government be able to access these records? And now they have a list of people in the country illegally. The governor was going to have the inspector general look into this, and the attorney general to whom the Inspector General report said, nope, no problem here, nothing to see here, go right ahead and we can sign this into law, and that's what happened.
You mentioned a public safety concern, but advocates for this say this actually enhances public safety because, first of all, these people will now be tested before they can drive a car. And with a license, they'll be much more likely to stay at the scene of an accident, get insurance on their car, and make the entire process legal.
I've heard that argument quite a bit, that it will improve traffic safety and specifically hit and runs. But my research says that people in the country illegally, when they get in a car accident, they don't hit and run because they don't have a driver's license. They hit and then run because they're in the country illegally. And this doesn't change the fact that they're in the country illegally. All it does is give the stamp of approval.
But you don't
on
think this
their
would increase the likelihood that they would stay in a case like that they would actually participate more actively?
No, I don't. And I don't even think it means that they're necessarily going to get insurance. Hey, if I can bring some foreign documents, which may or may not be legitimate, and get a driver's license, I can get 2, 3, 4 driver's licenses. So then, if I get in an accident, I lose my license, or my insurance goes up, well, then I just register my car, get my insurance under another name. If it happens again, I do the whole thing. And this is how you see the spiral against the rule of law. You know, people come to this country for economic reasons and for liberty and all these things. What holds the United States together, what makes the United States great, is that we have, in our 200-plus year history, more than any other country, respected the rule of law. Once that starts to break down, the very thing these people are escaping starts to happen here.
Understood. But that's such a black and white issue for people at home that I think that they can digest that themselves. So I'm trying to hit other nuances of the bill too. Your district is suburban, exurban, and rural. It's 2 hours north of New York City. Public transit is not great across New York. I mean, I'm not dismissing in your district.
We're on the Metro North Line. We're about 65 miles from Midtown.
But in terms of getting around in your district, if somebody is undocumented and lives in your district, and I guarantee there are some who live there or who work there, you know, isn't this just a better way of getting? Wouldn't that make them more productive members of the residents of the state, because they can go to church, they can go to court, they can go to the doctor and get medical care for their kids, they can go to school and meet with their teachers' parents more easily? I mean, doesn't this just make them better residents of New York?
Not necessarily. If we make their stay here, their illegal stay here, easier, I don't know how that makes them better residents of the state. The big concern that drove this bill was people in the country illegally, and their advocates said, well, we want to be able to drive to work. But the irony there is New York State legalized them driving to their job, which it's illegal for them to have. And you know, the old argument that illegal immigrants take away jobs that Americans would otherwise have, you can argue the degree of that, but that does happen. This just made it easier. Now if you had to have the American who drove the truck around for the pool installation company, or the legal resident who drove the truck around, now the illegal can take his or her job.
I get that. I just, and we'll make this the last question, because it's, to just simply ignore that population and say, well, you're on your own because you're here illegally, seems to be somewhat blind to the reality that they are here and that they are living here, and we may as well help bring them into the fold of being, you know, more responsible, more legal. I mean, doesn't just sort of putting them in the corner because of their status dismiss, you know, any need to provide assistance at all?
Anything that makes it easier to be in this country illegally increases the illegal immigration problem, increases the number of illegal immigrants.
As opposed to just dealing with the reality of the situation that we have now.
Well, the reality of the situation is, when we encourage people to come here illegally by making it easier to stay illegally, that crisis at the border, that misery, that human crisis at the border gets worse. So why are we doing things as policymakers here in New York that actually encourage more people to break the law? That is where the cycle has to be broken. We need to discourage people from breaking the law. People call illegal immigrants dreamers, especially young people. My belief is the real dreamers are people who want to come to this country, they're in their home country, following our process, jumping through the necessary hoops. That's my concern, more so than the people who jump the line and are here illegally and are looking to make that illegal stay a little bit easier on themselves.
Well, I thank you for coming on and joining giving us your perspective and joining the conversation.
My pleasure.
Assemblyman Kieran Lawler, Republican, of New York.
Now you're going to cause me some problems.
Well, if it wasn't obvious from the previous 7 minutes, Assemblyman, thanks very much.
I would just point out, there's bipartisan opposition to this, and the lawsuit against it from a county clerk is a Democrat county clerk in Erie County.
Thank you, sir.
And when we come back, another debate. This one in New York, but in other states as well. In fact, it's a national one. Vaccinations, particularly for measles. More and more states have decided to remove exemptions here, or remove the options to opt out, if you will, to have your kid vaccinated. We're going to talk to a doctor just back from the CDC to see where we are in this country on this, and the facts rather than some of the myths. Stay with us.